before Hera ever wore a crown, before her name was spoken in temples or whispered by brides, the cosmos itself was still recovering from tyranny. She was a daughter of ancient power, born to the titans Cronus and Rhea, at a time when the universe was ruled by hunger, suspicion, and prophecy. Cronus feared his children, and fear shaped Hera's earliest existence. Like her sisters and brothers, she was swallowed at birth, erased into darkness, denied sky, denied touch, denied time. Inside that living prison, Hera learned endurance. She learned silence. She learned that survival sometimes meant waiting. When Zeus finally rose and forced their father to release the children he had consumed, Hera returned to the world not as a helpless newborn, but as an immortal who had already known loss. Light struck her eyes again. Wind touched her skin, and in that moment, she understood something that would define her forever. The world could be taken from you, and it could be given back, but only if you were strong enough to claim it. The war that followed, the great struggle between Titans and Olympians, shaped Hera as much as any battle shaped Zeus. While thunder and lightning tore the heavens apart, Hera watched. She remembered betrayal. She remembered the cost of power left unchecked. And when the Olympians won and Mount Olympus became the seat of a new order, Hera did not rush for glory. She waited again. Because Hera was never a goddess of impulse. She was a goddess of permanence. When Zeus looked upon Hera, he did not see a prize to be taken in a moment. He saw resistance. He saw dignity. He saw a force that could not be bent easily, and that made her irresistible to him. Some myths say he pursued her openly. Others say he disguised himself, testing her compassion, appearing as a wounded bird trembling in a storm. Hera, moved by pity, gathered him to her chest, only for Zeus to reveal himself in divine splendor. Even then she did not surrender easily. Hera agreed to marriage only after long resistance, not because she was conquered, but because she demanded recognition. Their union was not merely romantic. It was political, cosmic, and symbolic. When Hera became queen, she did not become Zeus's shadow. She became his counterpart. Where Zeus ruled the sky with thunder, Hera ruled the structure beneath it all: law, legitimacy, and sacred bonds. She was crowned Queen of Olympus, and with that crown came a burden no other goddess carried. Hera became the guardian of marriage itself, not love in its fleeting, passionate form, but marriage as oath, as contract, as social foundation. She presided over weddings, protected wives, and oversaw childbirth. In mortal homes, her presence was invoked at thresholds and bridal chambers. In cities, her temples stood as symbols of lawful order. Yet the irony of Hera's role was cruel. For while she upheld marriage as sacred, her own was endlessly tested. Zeus's affairs were not secrets whispered in corners. They reshaped the world. Gods, heroes, monsters, and kings were born from his unions with nymphs, mortals, and goddesses alike. Each betrayal was a public wound. Each new child was a reminder that power excused behavior denied to others. Hera could not strike Zeus down. The balance of the cosmos would not allow it. But Hera was never powerless. She acted sideways. When Zeus loved Io, Hera turned the girl into a wandering creature, setting a watchful guardian over her suffering. When Zeus pursued Leto, Hera drove her across the earth, denying her rest. When Semele dared to ask for Zeus's true form, it was Hera's whisper that guided her to that fatal request. Again and again, Hera became the storm that followed Zeus's lightning. To later generations, these stories painted Hera as jealous, cruel, and vengeful. But jealousy was only the surface. Beneath it lived something deeper, the fury of a goddess whose authority was constantly undermined, whose role was honored in name, but violated in practice. Hera punished not because she was weak, but because she was bound by laws even Zeus bent. Her anger was not chaos, it was consequence. Among the gods, Hera's circle was complex and layered. She stood beside Zeus in council, her voice feared and respected. She clashed with Athena, whose birth without a mother cut Hera deeply, challenging her identity as the ultimate feminine creator. She despised Aphrodite, whose beauty and desire unraveled vows Hera worked to preserve. Yet she protected Artemis in her autonomy, respected Demeter's maternal grief, and understood Hestia's quiet devotion to home. Hera was not universally loved, but she was never ignored. As a mother, Hera's story grew even more complicated. Her children reflected the tensions within her own life. Ares, god of war, embodied raw conflict, despised by Zeus, tolerated by Hera, a reminder that not all offspring were born to harmony. Hephaestus, in some tellings born by Hera alone, symbolized defiance and independence. When he was cast from Olympus, his fall mirrored Hera's own emotional exile within her marriage. Yet even in pain, Hera endured. She never abandoned Olympus. She never relinquished her crown. She never stopped being queen. In temples across Greece, Hera was worshipped not as a villain, but as a protector. Women prayed to her for safe marriages, for healthy children, for dignity within households ruled by men. Cities like Argos and Samos honored her above all others. To them, Hera was stability in a world of unpredictable gods. She was the goddess who stayed. As time passed, poets softened her edges or sharpened them, depending on their needs. Philosophers debated whether Hera represented social order or divine resentment. Artists painted her serene, regal, distant, never chaotic, never wild. Even in rage, Hera remained composed. Her power was not explosive. It was relentless, and that is what made her terrifying. Because storms pass, but institutions endure. Hera's story does not begin or end with Zeus. It begins with survival and continues with sovereignty. She is not merely the wife of the king of gods. She is the keeper of vows, the enforcer of boundaries, the embodiment of what happens when sacred rules are broken again and again. In the silence after thunder fades, Hera is still there, watching, remembering, waiting. And this is only the beginning of her story. Power settled differently on Hera than it did on Zeus. Where his authority announced itself with thunder and spectacle, hers moved through ritual, tradition, and expectation. Once crowned Queen of Olympus, Hera did not roam the world seeking admiration. She remained seated at the center of it, allowing the world to come to her. Gods approached her carefully. Mortals prayed to her formally. No one mistook her presence for warmth, but no one questioned her importance. Hera ruled the invisible structures that held civilization together. Marriage, to Hera, was not romance. It was architecture. It was the beam that kept society from collapsing inward. When vows were spoken, she listened. When they were broken, she remembered. Long after passion faded, Hera remained, measuring the damage left behind. In mortal cities, this made her indispensable. Women invoked her name not for affection, but for protection. In households ruled by men, Hera represented the idea that a wife was not property, but a sacred role. Brides dedicated locks of hair to her temples. Queens mirrored their authority after hers. Even kings understood that legitimacy flowed through Hera's blessing as much as Zeus's favor. Yet Olympus itself often denied her what she defended below. Zeus's infidelities did more than wound her pride. They undermined the divine order Hera embodied. Every affair declared that vows were flexible for the powerful. Every illegitimate child challenged the meaning of lawful succession. And so Hera responded in the only way left to her, by restoring balance through ordeal. Her punishments were never random. When she targeted Zeus's lovers, she did not act as a jealous rival alone, but as an enforcer of consequence. The world needed to see that divine law was not optional. Even gods paid a price when boundaries were crossed. To mortals, this often looked cruel. To Hera, it was necessary. This tension shaped her reputation across generations. Poets favored stories of her rage. Heroes cursed her name when obstacles rose in their paths. But cities remembered her differently. In Argos, she was worshipped as the great protectress. In Samos, her sanctuary rivaled any dedicated to Zeus himself. Festivals celebrated her authority, not her temper. Statues portrayed her calm, veiled, enthroned, untouchable. Hera did not chase love. She commanded respect. Within the divine family, her relationships were layered with rivalry and restraint. Athena's presence cut deepest. Born without a mother, sprung fully formed from Zeus's mind, Athena embodied a threat to Hera's domain. Wisdom without maternity, power without marriage. Hera did not openly war against her, but the tension between them shaped Olympus. They represented two visions of authority, one rooted in tradition, the other in intellect. Aphrodite posed a different danger. Where Hera guarded vows, Aphrodite dissolved them. Desire bent rules, beauty made chaos look sweet. Hera despised her not merely out of jealousy, but out of fear for what unchecked desire did to the world. When Aphrodite moved, households fractured. Wars began. Hera saw clearly what others romanticized. Demeter, however, earned Hera's understanding. Both were goddesses tied to female suffering in a world shaped by male decree. Demeter's grief over her daughter echoed Hera's own silent griefs. Losses endured publicly but mourned privately. Their bond was not loud, but it was real. Together they represented the cost of divine politics on maternal hearts. Hestia, quiet and unambitious, reflected another path Hera could never take. While Hestia withdrew from conflict, Hera remained at its center. One chose peace by absence, the other chose order through presence. Hera respected Hestia deeply, even if she did not envy her freedom. As queen, Hera also mastered diplomacy. She advised Zeus in council, often restraining his impulses. She understood alliances, reputations, and long memory. When gods rebelled against Zeus's tyranny, Hera did not always oppose them. Some myths whisper that she even joined such plots, not out of ambition, but to remind Zeus that kingship required consent, not fear. Even when those attempts failed, Hera endured the punishment. Chains, humiliation, isolation, she survived them all, and she returned to her throne. As centuries passed, Hera's influence seeped into human law. Marriage contracts mirrored divine ones. Queens styled themselves after her image. Even in cultures that feared her anger, her symbolism endured. Hera represented something rare among gods: accountability. She did not forgive easily. She did not forget at all. But she held the world together while others tore it apart. In every story told about her cruelty, there is another story beneath it, about a goddess forced to defend order in a universe that rewarded chaos. Hera's power was not soft, but it was stabilizing. Without her, Olympus would have fractured into impulse and indulgence. She was the spine of the divine family, unyielding, unbreakable, and increasingly alone. Yet Hera never abandoned her post. No matter how often Zeus strayed, no matter how often poets mocked her fury, she remained queen of heaven. Not because she was loved, but because she was necessary. The world still turned on vows. Cities still stood on legitimacy. And Hera still watched every promise made beneath the sky. Her story continues not in moments of thunder, but in quiet ceremonies, whispered oaths, and the fragile hope that order can survive even the gods themselves. There came a time when Hera's patience hardened into resolve. Not the fleeting anger of a moment, but something older and colder. A certainty that order could only survive if it was defended without mercy. Zeus's betrayals had become woven into the fabric of the world. His children walked the earth as kings, heroes, and monsters, each living reminder of vows broken without consequence. Hera understood something few others did. If no one paid the price for divine excess, the cosmos itself would rot. So Hera became the reckoning. Her name spread among mortals not only as queen, but as warning. One of the earliest lessons the world learned came through Io. She was not a goddess, not a queen, just a young woman whose fate crossed Zeus's desire. When Hera discovered the deception, she did not strike blindly. She transformed Io's life into a lesson carved in suffering, placing her under the watch of an unblinking guardian, forcing Zeus himself to feel the weight of his choices. The earth bore witness as Io wandered endlessly, a living symbol of how far divine indulgence could ripple. Hera did not rejoice in this. She endured it. Each act of vengeance deepened her isolation, but retreat was never an option. A queen who abandons justice loses her throne long before anyone notices. Hera knew that fear, even resentment, preserved respect when affection could not. But no story bound Hera's legacy to pain more tightly than that of Heracles. From the moment of his conception, he embodied everything Hera loathed and everything Zeus celebrated. A child born of betrayal, raised as a hero, praised for strength that owed nothing to law or marriage. Even his name, Glory of Hera, mocked her. Some say Zeus chose it to appease her. Others believe fate itself was cruel enough to do so. Hera did not destroy Heracles outright. She tested him. Madness came upon him like a storm, twisting strength into tragedy. The blood spilled was not Hera's victory. It was the price of existence under divine injustice. Heracles' labors were not merely punishments. They were trials meant to shape chaos into discipline. Each monster slain, each impossible task completed, dragged him closer to the order Hera defended. In a way few acknowledged, Hera forged him. And in the end, when Heracles rose to immortality, it was Hera who accepted him among the gods, not as forgiveness, but as recognition. Order had been restored, balance reclaimed. Even her greatest enemy earned a place once the world had been set right. Hera's wrath was never without purpose, yet the cost was heavy. Other gods began to fear her presence, not because she was unpredictable, but because she was inevitable. Where Hera walked, truths surfaced, lies unraveled. Zeus himself learned caution, not restraint, but awareness that even kings were watched. At times, Hera turned her fury toward Olympus itself. There were whispers of rebellion, of chains forged for the king of gods, of Hera standing not as wife but as equal, demanding accountability. When those efforts failed, punishment followed. But Hera endured humiliation the way mountains endure storms, unchanged when the sky clears. Her silence afterward was more frightening than any outburst. Among mortals, stories grew darker. Poets spoke of her as relentless. Heroes cursed her interference. Yet temples remained full. Brides still prayed. Cities still honored her. Even those who feared Hera trusted her more than gods who smiled easily. Because smiles lied, Hera did not. She represented the cost of civilization, the truth that order is not gentle, that promises demand enforcement, and that power without restraint destroys itself. In a pantheon of excess, Hera stood as the last wall against collapse, lonely, unthanked, unmoved. Her story is not one of love lost, but of duty chosen again and again, no matter how bitter the outcome. Hera did not seek admiration. She sought endurance, and through suffering, through wrath, through centuries of misunderstanding, she preserved the fragile structure of the world. Even the gods lived within boundaries because Hera existed, and as long as vows were spoken, she would remain, watching, weighing, and waiting for the next promise to be broken. Time did not soften Hera. It clarified her. As generations passed, mortals changed faster than the gods. Cities rose, laws evolved, and human ideas of marriage, loyalty, and power shifted like sand beneath the sun. Yet Hera remained constant, watching civilizations reinterpret the vows she once defined. Some honored her deeply. Others reduced her to a cautionary tale. Still, her influence never vanished. Hera understood time better than most immortals. She had watched titans fall, Olympians rise, heroes burn bright and fade. She knew that power was temporary, but structure endured. Zeus might command the skies, but Hera shaped the rhythm beneath them. The customs passed from mother to daughter. The expectations whispered at wedding fires. The quiet judgments that followed broken promises. In this way, Hera ruled where thunder could not reach. Across Greece, her temples became anchors of identity. In Argos, she was the city's heart. In Samos, her sanctuary stood immense, older than many gods' cults, whispering of a time when Hera may have reigned alone, before Zeus's name dominated the heavens. There were even stories, half remembered, half erased, that Hera had once been worshipped as supreme, a sky queen before kings claimed the clouds. Whether true or not, the memory lingered. Hera carried herself like a goddess who had once known absolute authority. This quiet dominance unsettled even Zeus. Their marriage evolved into something colder but stronger than passion. They argued like forces of nature colliding, never truly separating, never truly merging. When Zeus ruled through fear, Hera ruled through legitimacy. When he acted alone, she reminded him that no king survives without recognition. Even Zeus could not escape that truth. There were moments, rare, fragile, when Hera's softer side emerged. When women prayed to her in labor, she listened. When queens stood isolated on thrones built by men, Hera understood their solitude. She did not remove suffering, but she witnessed it, and for mortals, that acknowledgement mattered. To be seen by the Queen of Heaven was its own form of grace. Yet Hera never allowed herself indulgence. Compassion did not mean surrender. Mercy did not erase consequence. She embodied a truth civilization often resisted. Order demands sacrifice, and fairness is not always gentle. This made her unpopular in stories told by men who celebrated conquest, freedom, and desire. But in the quiet spaces, in homes, in marriages strained but unbroken, in vows kept despite temptation, Hera lived on as a silent guide. Even monsters felt her influence. Many creatures born of divine chaos existed because rules were broken. Hera did not create them, but she ensured the world responded to them. Heroes faced trials not simply to prove strength, but to restore balance. Behind many quests stood Hera's invisible hand, steering fate toward equilibrium rather than annihilation. She was not the goddess of endings, she was the goddess of containment. As Olympian politics grew more complex, Hera's role shifted subtly. She became less reactive, more watchful. Where once she punished swiftly, now she waited, letting mortals reveal themselves through choices. Time became her ally. Kings who ruled unjustly fell without her intervention. Bloodlines born of arrogance collapsed under their own weight. Hera learned that endurance was the most devastating form of power. Her marriage, though strained, never dissolved. That alone shaped the universe. Divorce among gods would have shattered cosmic order. Hera understood that her presence beside Zeus, however bitter, kept the heavens stable. Leaving would have been easier. She stayed, and in staying she defined herself not as a victim of betrayal, but as the axis around which the divine world turned. When poets reduced her to jealousy, Hera did not correct them. Reputation mattered less than function. Let the stories simplify her. Let mortals misunderstand. The vows would still be sworn. The laws would still stand. The world would still rely on structures she guarded. In the end, Hera did not need affection. She needed continuity. And as long as humans gathered to promise loyalty, to form families, to build societies that demanded trust, Hera's presence endured. Quiet, severe, and unyielding. The storm of gods might rage above, but beneath it, Hera held the world together. And she would continue to do so, even as the age of gods slowly gave way to the age of memory. In the final ages of the gods, when belief began to thin and stories replaced worship, Hera did not fade the way others did. She transformed. As temples crumbled and sacrifices grew rare, Zeus remained thunder in myth, Poseidon a restless sea, Aphrodite a passing desire. But Hera lingered in something deeper than fear or fantasy. She lived in structure, in expectation, in the quiet insistence that promises mattered even when no gods were watching. Hera became memory made law. Mortals no longer needed to name her to feel her presence. She existed every time a vow was sworn with trembling hands. Every time loyalty was chosen over temptation. Every time betrayal carried consequences that echoed longer than pleasure. Where society demanded commitment, Hera stood unseen, still enthroned. Her legacy was not spectacle, it was permanence. Even her marriage to Zeus, so often portrayed as a battlefield of resentment, revealed its final meaning over time. Hera was not trapped by that bond. She defined it. By remaining, she ensured that even the king of gods could not escape accountability entirely. Zeus ruled the sky, but Hera ruled continuity. Dynasties, legitimacy, inheritance, all flowed through her domain. Without Hera, Zeus would have been a storm without direction. With her, the universe endured. In later generations, philosophers stripped the gods of divinity and poets softened their edges. Hera was reimagined, reduced, sometimes dismissed. Yet her essence survived in customs older than any poem. Marriage rites, legal oaths, social bonds that punished betrayal not with lightning but with exile, shame, and loss of trust. Hera's justice outlived her worship, and perhaps that was her greatest triumph. She was never meant to be adored easily. She was meant to be obeyed, respected, and understood slowly. Hera asked humanity to confront an uncomfortable truth, that freedom without responsibility corrodes everything it touches, and that love without commitment leaves ruin behind. In this way, Hera became timeless. She was no longer only the queen of Olympus. She was the silent judge standing at every crossroads where choice mattered. She was the weight behind words like promise and duty. She was the reason endings hurt when vows were broken, and the reason stability felt sacred when they were kept. Even now, long after her temples have fallen, Hera has not vanished. She exists in every institution that demands loyalty, in every bond tested by desire, in every moment when walking away would be easier, but staying preserves something greater. Hera was never the goddess of love. She was the goddess of what remains after love fades, and that is why her story does not end. It simply continues, quietly, relentlessly, wherever the world insists that promises still mean something.